Welcome in. It is Big Ten today on a Tuesday. We are presented by Taco Bell, which makes this a Taco Tuesday. Jake, good thing. Good thing also to be close to football. 2 days away. You fired up for this?
I'm fired up. It was a fun camp tour, too.
It was great.
Just kind of lay the foundation of the conference. But everyone's 0-0 at this point. Everyone's got a blank slate. Number of teams got those championship aspirations. We'll finally get to put it on tape this weekend.
We will. You'll see a team with some championship aspirations and some championship rings as well in the Oregon Ducks, defending champs. We're joined as well by Yogi Roth, and Yogi is getting set to call USC and Missouri State. Yogs, you ready to go?
I am ready to go. I mean, the only thing you kind of wish as a broadcaster in week one is that you had a game like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So you just want to get moving. Jake, I know you can relate to that, man. So I'm ready to roll. And I think all of us, anybody who's played or anybody been around this thing, you can't wait to just get to a field. Like, I can't wait to smell the grass at the Coliseum. As simple as that sounds. And then hear the pads, see the fans, eat some popcorn, watch a fan in celebration and in dismay. Like, all the things that make college football beautiful finally come to fruition in a matter of days.
I know Trojan fans are hoping it'll be more celebration than dismay against Missouri State this weekend as we get to our big story, and it is week one in the Big Ten, courtesy of the big board. Everyone in the conference is playing this weekend. 4 games on Thursday. We got 2 of them here on the Big Ten Network. Rutgers and Wisconsin both in action. Also see Nebraska and Minnesota on opening night. Illinois and Michigan State open their seasons Friday. And then Saturday, the other dozen teams kick off the season. 5 games here on the Big Ten Network. Mentioned Yogi in L.A. Jake will be in Eugene to see the defending Big Ten champs. And so let us start there with the Oregon Ducks. Yogs, we're going to need you to give Jake a little bit of a primer. You were at Oregon camp. Jake was not. So what can we expect out of the Ducks? What stood out?
Well, you see these shoes I have behind me? Let me show them. These are big shoes.
Nice, yeah,
and
those are nifty.
Bo Nix had to fill some big shoes at Oregon. These are Duck customs, okay? And then here came QB1 last year and Dylan Gabriel. He had to fill those shoes. And then it's like, all right, who are you going to go get? You got to go get a guy in the portal. What are you going to do? And they said, no, we're going to get Dante Moore, who arrived 2 years ago, got to sit, learn, and I'm just a big believer in when you do that, you have an opportunity to truly thrive and let it rip. And that is easily my biggest story, biggest takeaway from watching the Oregon Ducks. Have they reloaded? Yes. Do they have an opportunity to repeat? Yes. But I think that Dante Moore has a chance to be one of the top quarterbacks, not just in this league, but in the entire country. He throws what I have seen, at least with my eyes, Jake, the most catchable ball in training camp. Known this guy since he was in high school. I get that he had struggles as a true freshman at UCLA, but he is sat, his ability to process, his ability to navigate things at the line of scrimmage as plays happen. I mean, cue up the replays, man, because you are going to showcase many beautiful throws from him on Saturday in Autzen Stadium.
Yeah, and I think his maturity is what really stood out to me because he chose to join Oregon after Dylan Gabriel had already committed, and he basically said, hey, I wanted to come to the Ducks because I feel this is a program that's going to develop me. And I know you're extremely high on his talent, but one thing I'm curious about, Yogi, is, Coach Will Stein, their offensive coordinator, does such a great job of forcing defenses to defend the entire field, every blade of grass. And the storyline for Oregon is replacing all the talent they lost at the wide receiver to the NFL. Evan Stewart gets injured. They bring in some key pieces in the transfer portal, and talking to those around the program, I think they feel they're 4 or 5 deep at the running back position. Do you anticipate, even with the talent of Dante Moore, that, the identity may be more running the ball and getting physical up front, at least early in the season?
Well, I think that's the identity of Dan Lanning. And I think when you talk to Will Stein, what's great about his system is it's rooted in the West Coast offense, which is, this as well as anybody, man. When you want to run the football, and then at times it's quick passes to generate a little bit of a run game. So they did that, right? Whether it's behind the line of scrimmage, quick screens. I think you'll see a nice combination of that. I love their offensive line. Isaiah World, he has a chance to be one of the top tackles in the country, the transfer from Nevada. And the left side of their offensive line is as good as you're going to find in this league right now, with Emmanuel Pregnon transferring from USC at the guard and then at the center. Pancho comes on back. He's kind of a man entrenched there in the middle for them. So I like the depth there. To your point of the weapons, I think with Will Stein and his creativity, they're just going to find unique and different ways than they did a year ago to get playmakers the ball, starting with one of your favorite guys in Kenyon Sadiq. He's an absolute monster. He'll line up in the backfield. We saw it last year in the Big Ten title game against Penn State. He'll line up truly as a tight end, hand in the dirt. He'll line up in the slot. He'll line up wide. He'll line up as a running back. I mean, he can do a little bit of everything. I think he's going to be the apex of this offense. I think a lot of this offense will run through him. And then you look at the playmakers, to your point. Just remember the name Decorian Moore. He's not Jeremiah Smith, but he's going to be a freshman All-American. He's got all of the capability to do that. Played big-time high school football out of Texas. He came mid-year, was an impactful player in the spring. When I saw him at camp, I was like, oh, okay, you can see a guy going through an entire offseason program, just looks the part physically. And then I think Justice Lowe is somebody who's been around the program. He and Kyle Casper, two wideouts that don't have all the fanfare as some big-time recruits necessarily, but I think they will come onto the scene. And if you look at the variety of bodies, I liken them to a basketball team. I mean, they've got a guard, they got a two guard, they got a power forward, I mean, wide receiver. They have a variety of different weapons that I think Will Stein will have no problem getting the ball to. In fact, I think the only problem will be making sure you can feed all of those studs at playmakers because there's so many of them. You reference the backs. There's 5 deep at running back. Tight ends, they're 3 or 4 deep. They're wideouts. They got 6 to 8 players that I think will be in a rotation come Saturday.
You know, listening to Yogi kind of name all those names, you know, as I've been thinking about calling the game this weekend, like what's the difference between the good teams and the elite programs that compete for a championship every year? It's really your ability to reload. And there's going to be a ton of new faces getting the start for the Ducks this weekend. But those are high-profile names. Decorian Moore, 5-star. I mean, Dante Moore, 5-star. That is what I'm expecting to see and anticipate seeing is an Oregon Ducks team with new faces, but that are ready to reload and compete again.
Portal class ranked first in the Big Ten and the top 5 in the nation would absolutely speak to that. Okay, so we're going to continue to run through some of these CFP hopeful teams and some of the other teams in the Big Ten here picked towards the top of the league. Let's go to Michigan. And other than one camp, I think, where you were both there, you were both at Penn State. So of these teams we're going to talk about here early on, we'll lean on the person who was there first. You and I were just there on Friday. Got a chance to see the Maize and Blue. Obviously, Bryce Underwood is the biggest story. So I'm guessing maybe you want to start there. But what did you see from Michigan as they try to get the offense back to the level we had expected?
Well, let's start with Bryce, but his success is going to be predicated by the team as a whole. And I think the first thing that I was interested in seeing is, you know, we did the recruiting show earlier in the year and listening to those that followed his high school career closely, we were told that this guy is a different level of talent. I mean, he's in a class of just a handful of elite quarterback recruits. And then I get up and see him in person, and I'm 6'5", I'm a tight end, and I'm standing eye to eye, shoulder to shoulder with this guy. He's so physically gifted. The ball completely jumps out of his hands. J.J. McCarthy was a top 10 pick. And I would say Bryce, in terms of his physical talents, is at another level even from J.J. But I had this thought watching him practice, Dave, and the best thing you can do for a talented quarterback is give him a dominant run game and a dominant defense because he's going to be a freshman. This is not going to be linear. He's going to make mistakes this year. All quarterbacks do, but there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. The best thing that Sharon Moore and Chip Lindsey and the entire Michigan Wolverines can do for him is to run the ball, get him into easy reads and play action, and have a stout defense that doesn't make him feel like he has to be Superman, though I do believe he can be Superman at some point in his career. And the big take, I don't need to go through all the names. The defense is going to be here to stay. It's a top 10 defense. That should be their goals this year. The offensive line is built to run the ball. I know Howard said he feels Bryce Haynes and Jordan Marshall might be the best duo in the Big Ten. That's saying a lot considering all the talent in the Big Ten. So for Bryce Underwood, I know we're all excited to see him and what he's capable of doing, but I think the winning formula for Michigan should remain the same, which is to say run the ball and play great defense.
Okay, I want to follow up on that because I was watching your guys' show, obviously, after it aired, and my first follow-up is if Bryce Underwood, we know his potential, we know his ceiling, we also know this league. Every team from the bottom to the top has improved this year. So I'm kind of curious when it's the gotta-have-it moments, what do you think they're going to do? Call it a 3rd and 7, gotta have it. Do you think it's going to be play conservative? Do you think it's going to be letter? I'm talking like at Oklahoma, right, in the big games early on in this season. And if so, who are the playmakers on the other side that you think can go ahead and beat man coverage and beat blitz zero, all-out pressure, man-to-man on the outside in the slot, and can they get that done based on what you've seen? Or what might you say might be the potential of them getting that done based on being at a practice?
I'm laughing because I'm thinking about what last season was. It's a 2-minute drive to win the game against USC, and they get in goal line personnel, and it worked. I mean, on the road in Columbus, it's 3rd and 6, and they hand the ball off out of 12 personnel to Khalil Mullings. I think part of the reason you bring in Bryce Underwood, you add in Chip Lindsey, you go out and get Donovan McCulley at wide receiver, and they're really excited about Marlon Klein, is to say that now they have the potential to go another way. I wouldn't be surprised if they still do run the ball in third and medium and gotta-have-it situations, just because that is the strength of the offense as it stands right now and who Sharon Moore wants it to be. But now you have a 6'5" NBA basketball-type body in Donovan McCulley. They think Marlon Klein could be a first-round pick at tight end when he reaches his full potential. And, of course, we've talked about Bryce Underwood. I don't know, Yogi, because I know Sharon Moore wants to run the ball, but I think this year they at least have the option, which makes them that much harder to defend from a defensive standpoint.
Yeah, it's going to be so fun to watch his growth, because you're right. Everything he'll go through will be for the first time. And I think just from a fan's perspective, like, remember that. Like, for these young quarterbacks, it's their first experience, first home game, first road game, first time having those jitters, first pick six, first 3-touchdown game. Like, all of those things are first experiences. I'm so curious to watch how Sharon Moore and Chip Lindsey navigate that, because they're all tied at the hip. Their head spaces need to be similar. We all know that. And it's a long season. And I think his growth is going to be really fun to track in the first third of the season, the middle, and then, of course, at the end of the game we all know that comes at the end of every season with them against Ohio State. So that to me, will be the most exciting part, is the psyche of him and the head coach and the OC, and then how he sees the game and progresses with what his eyes tell him as things get even more complex.
It is interesting. It's just so unusual in this day and age, a true freshman starting quarterback, particularly these last few years where teams have relied so much on the transfer portal. But if you're going to go with a true freshman, to have him be the #1 recruit in the country, that's a good place to start, no doubt. Yogi, let's turn our attention to Illinois. They've got a veteran at quarterback in Luke Altmaier. Illinois was the same day as Northwestern, so Jake and I were at Northwestern. You're the only one who saw the Fighting Illini in this group. There is so much excitement in Champaign, as you know. Season tickets are sold out. They are certainly being talked about as a college football playoff contending team. What will it take for the Illini to get there?
Well, two things stood out, and they were so impressive for me. One, Coach Bielema, major thanks for allowing us really tremendous access, like all the stops. We got to go and do a team meeting on the night before practice that we were there. I think it was a Wednesday night. And we roll in, and I'm so curious, being around a lot of high-performing cultures, you wonder, how are they going to navigate when all eyes are on them? I think when opportunity is in front of big-time programs, sometimes the team can get tight because they want to be perfect, because they don't want to miss the opportunity in front of them. And hearing their head coach, who has such vast experience leading programs, being in big moments. Think of him early on in his career in his 30s as a head coach, time with the Patriots as an assistant. I mean, he's seen so much. To listen to him and then hear the players, he had a couple players address the team that night, to hear them talk about, hey, we have a big chip on our shoulder, but we also have this opportunity. Let's enjoy it. Let's cut it loose and let it rip. And I go back to my time with Pete Carroll. That was the whole thing. I mean, every year you're picked to win it, right? Kind of like the hype that Illinois has now. And for them in this program, it's the first time in quite a long time. Even when they went to the Rose Bowl under Coach Zook, they didn't have the preseason hype that they have today. And I just felt like this team was really loose. And it just jumped out to me, which the way the players talked and communicated and critiqued or celebrated. And then it carried over to practice. And then my second takeaway was talking to Luke Altmaier post-practice. He talked about how his first big-time start, you guys remember it a couple years ago against Penn State, multi-interceptions in that game, and how he navigated not his ability physically, but in between his own ears. And I think so much, whether it's Bryce Underwood or whether it's Luke Altmaier or any quarterback in major college football, that is the most impactful skill you have to develop. And he went to work on that. I mean, he trained in between his ears all offseason to prepare for the expectations, for the noise, for the praise, for the blame. And I just walked out saying, I think this team is ready for this moment. I don't think they're not going to catch anybody by surprise, and they're not going to catch themselves by surprise in terms of being too tight. So I think it's loose, it's focused. I expect them to live up to the expectations that are put on them this season if they can stay healthy.
If I was an Illini fan, I'd be really encouraged by you saying that, Yogi, because, you know, the storyline of Illinois' season last year was their ability to win one-score games. And when you're in a close game late in the fourth quarter, there's a natural tendency to get nervous and tighten up a little bit. But Illinois, they were able to thrive in those moments. And a big reason was Altmaier was consistently looking to his guy, Pat Bryant, one of the more underappreciated receivers in the Big Ten last year. I mean, just a phenomenal talent. That's where I want to go, is just kind of the same question that you asked me about Michigan. There's a ton of new faces there on the outside. Do you think that they have one go-to guy that Altmaier is going to look to in some close games this year?
I think it's going to be dependent on the situation. I'm going to lean on that. Like, I think Minnesota got a transfer named Logan Lawyer from UCLA. Third down red zone, I think you'll find him in the slot. Hank Beatty be the same deal, I think, for them in the slot. But Malik, Elzy, Colin Dixon, Hudson Clement, I'm kind of looking at my board from practice. They all vary in size, length, ability, acumen. So I think it's going to be by committee, and then it's going to be by situation. I'm really a fan of what Barry Lunny Jr. does offensively. You go back and you study them in the latter part of the season or in different situations. And I think, Jake, this is a theme this year. I think it's going to be a matchup league. Like, a scheme will always be good, but I think it's going to feel a little bit more like the NFL than ever before because quarterback play is so high and coordinators are so talented. I think they're going to be looking for those specific moments where they feel as though, hey, it's their slot receiver on a big nickel or their big wide receiver on an outside linebacker, man-to-man coverage, and they get them there in motion. Like, I think that's how Illinois is going to be able to continue to win some of these tight games.
They won a lot of them last year, as we know. I mean, you think about like Rutgers down to the last play. Purdue easily could have lost. The narrative would be different around the Illini, but again, that's the storyline. They figured out a way, and it's honestly kind of the inverse of what the story has been at Nebraska through the years and has continued early on with Matt Rule, 3-10 in one-score games. They did make it to a bowl game last year. We were there, it seems like ages ago, right, that we were in Nebraska. It was the first stop on the tour, but man, they are excited about this team. You could see why. They're really talented. What did you see from Nebraska as you think about them perhaps being one of those dark horse teams?
You know, I go back to when they were able to bring in Dylan Raiola and secure him as the quarterback of their future. And I think we saw flashes last year clearly that this guy can be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. So then how does he get there? And I'd say it's the job of your coordinator, Dana Holgorsen, to extract that value from your quarterback. And the hiring of Dana Holgorsen is one of the key hires in the conference this year. You've also surrounded him with talent. Dane Key was not even practicing when we're out there. Right. He has a chance to be one of the better receivers in the conference. Barney has taken a clear leadership role and is a gadget piece. The offensive line looks bigger, leaner, stronger, better equipped to protect Dylan Raiola. So I say that to say this. They're in position to extract the five-star value of their quarterback. And then I go to the schedule, Dave, and say, this is a mental thing. When you talk about these one-score games and Yogi's talking about how loose and free Illinois was able to play, Matt Rule kind of alluded to this. There's a weight on this program's shoulders. Cincinnati is a good football team. That's going to be a challenging game, which means it's a great opportunity. Week 4 at home against Michigan. We just said Michigan's going to be starting a young quarterback. Sharon Moore won't be coaching on the sidelines for that game. Those are two great opportunities here early in the season with your young quarterback and your new offensive coordinator to start to shift the mentality of this program so they can experience that success we've become accustomed to in year 3, Matt Rule.
I'm curious for you guys, because you were there and you've been around this a lot. Like, teams often fall into two categories, either player-led or coach-fed. And it's a little cliche, but I think it's accurate. And you look at Matt Rule and everywhere he's been, what he's done when he gets to this year within his team, whether it was Temple or Baylor. What did you notice about the body language of the team? That's what I'm most curious about. If you had a lean either way, or was it too early in training camp to tell?
That was one of the key things that stood out. Is I think Matt Rule he's changed the way he approaches talking to this team. He wants to empower the players because he believes they're ready to take that next step. There's little indicators of, one thing that stood out to me is the offensive line was going through individual in their indoor. They jogged kind of loosely onto the field, and the coach sent them back in and said, guys, take the field with pride. You want to be a championship team? Take the field like a championship team. And then, Dave, remember we were talking to Matt Rule after we interviewed him, and it basically alluded to exactly that. Yep. He wants the players to feel like this is their exact team. I mean, you remember that, right? And
absolutely.
Talking to Dylan Raiola, did you get the same sense there,
too? No doubt. Now, you pointed that out to me as all that was going on with the offensive line running out there or not running out to the liking of the position coach. But it does. I think there was such a monkey on their back here trying to break through to the bowl game last year. I still think they have a huge mission and a sense of mission, but I do feel like they're a team that now believes that they can win and feels like they're ready to take the next step. Close games a theme, no doubt, and close games were a theme for USC last year as well, Yogi. I mean, another one of those teams. I mean, they led in the fourth quarter in 12 of their 13 games last year, but as we know, they won 8 of those games. So there were a lot of close losses a season ago. You had a chance to see Lincoln Riley's team get set for this season. What do you think about the Trojans as they look to be one of those teams that maybe is a dark horse?
Well, I'll tell you what, USC and even UCLA and Washington, there was a commonality of they just looked the part. Like, they looked the part on the defensive front and the offensive line. I'll just start with that. On the offensive line, I think one of the most unique takeaways, and we'll see if this plays out on Saturday, but they may have a starting offensive line that all came out of high school. The majority, like 95% of the offensive linemen among the final 4 teams last year in major college football, it was the same deal. They all came out of high school. Lincoln Riley loves to run the football. That was my biggest takeaway. I think they're going to run the football. I think Jaden Maiava, he's a quarterback there who's now entrenched as a starter, right? He had his 4 starts a year ago. Spending time with him, his shoulders drop, meaning like he feels as though he owns the position. And at USC, I've said this one for 20 years now, fellas, you sign there as a quarterback, you're a household name. You start, you're a Heisman candidate. That is real, that is legit at USC. If you can run the football, it gives your Heisman chances and the chances of your team finding success much, much higher than they would if you couldn't. And I thought that's where USC at times in those games where they had the lead, they struggle a little bit. I think a playmaker, their top 2 receivers, you could argue, Jeremiah Smith, his high is so much higher than anybody else's, but Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon, they're monsters. I mean, find another duo in this league that isn't in Columbus, Ohio, that you'd even comp them to. I think they are going to take the top off of defense. I think they're going to be really dynamic. And then the defensive front. I referenced how they look the part. They do up front. Cameron Fountain is a guy we'll be highlighting all game long come Saturday evening on the Big Ten Network. Also, Devin Tompkins. He's a guy who I think they'll move all over that defensive line. So they don't have tremendous depth. Like, they don't have the Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon depth on offense and defensive lines. But those first 7 on the offensive line, the first 8 on the defensive line, Anthony Lucas would be another one. They look the part. So if they can stay healthy, I think USC has a chance to turn those tight losses into tight wins this season.
You highlighted the 2 key areas that I'm looking for the Trojans this year, and Danton Lynn has came out and vocally said that, he felt last year that they weren't able to run a number of the defensive blitz packages that he would like to get into because he didn't feel they had the bodies to get into those personnel groups up front. And then on the flip side, I thought USC was able to run the ball, but Lincoln Riley, they just got away from it late in games. The flip side for the Trojans is they're kind of similar to Nebraska. They're the anti-Illinois, which is they lost. They were on the wrong side of some of these one-score games. Yogi, is it as simple to say is that's the missing piece to flip these games, start running the ball and playing defense, Big Ten football effectively?
Well, I think, run the football does a few things. Outside of it's a mindset, it also takes away a possession. I think from every one of your opponents, you kind of do the metrics on that. So I think there's an element there. I think this offensive line, I'll be so curious to see how it comes together. Even in Saturday, I get they're going to play Missouri State, but they're going to see a really aggressive unit. How do they communicate? How do they navigate all the twists and stunts that come with that? And then what is the QB run game? Jaden Maiava. I mean, there were moments last year, man, where he flashed. Go turn on that A&M game in the bowl game in Las Vegas. And there's times where you're like, ooh, that was a negative. And then there are other times you're like, well, double plus. So I just want to see him play steady. I think if they have that at the QB position, man, they will have the ability to turn those tight losses into wins and also use his legs in the quarterback run game.
And again, USC, I think I said 8 wins last year, 7 wins last year for the Trojans. How about Penn State? Let's turn our attention to them. Finally, it's the one team, I mentioned this off the top, that both of you guys saw in camp. They're the team that was picked in the preseason to win the Big Ten. We saw them break through and make the playoff last year, not just make the playoff, but win a couple of games in that playoff. Now the expectation or the hope certainly is that they could be a team that wins the national championship. What did you see in terms of national championship DNA there?
Well, we can go back to the prior 2 national champions in Ohio State and Michigan and look at the formula they use, which is to say having a veteran team, having a veteran quarterback that's a leader. Will Howard played a ton of football. His leadership really stood out for the Buckeyes. Obviously, the same can be said about J.J. McCarthy in Michigan, and that's what Penn State has with Drew Aller, which is a guy that is also a first-round talent. James Franklin thinks could be a top 10 pick and is clearly a leader. It is surrounded by leaders with Singleton and Allen and some of those key pieces in the offensive line. I'm excited to see him. But what I saw more than anything, and it's, you don't want to feel you need to prove how good Drew Aller is. We know he's good. To me, Dave, that offensive line has a chance to compete for the Joe Moore Award. If I had to guess, that's the best offensive line in the Big Ten right now. And understanding how talented they are in the backfield, I think the best thing that the Nittany Lions could do would be to run the ball, establish physicality up front. Yeah. You have Jim Knowles, the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football right now. Play great defense. It goes all the way back to what we're saying with Michigan, but Drew Aller is more of a proven quarterback than Bryce Underwood. Run the ball, play great defense. That will be the thing that takes them to their ultimate goals.
I like that, man. I'm a huge believer in Drew Aller. I think quarterbacks need to have scars. I think he's had them. I think he's learned from them. So my question for you is defensively. You referenced a couple defensive fronts in this segment, notably Michigan. You also saw Penn State's. We know Zane Durant denied Dennis Sutton. What was your takeaway from the front seven when you comp it to the other ones that you think are elite in the league?
I think the combination of Zane Durant and deny Dennis Sutton, because, a great edge is improved by having a great defensive tackle. It's circular. They benefit one another. Putting those two guys on the same side of the defensive line is going to be an impossible equation for most offenses to solve. I mean, Zane Durant is a great pass rusher on the interior, and Deni Dennis Sutton has a chance to take that next stride and play himself into a day two, maybe even a day one pick if he can take that next stride. I mean, that every great championship team has a pass rusher that can make life extremely hard on third down and 2-minute and obvious passing situations. I think it's an iron sharpens iron thing here too, which is that's a veteran defensive line going up against a veteran offensive line. The competition is a rising tide that really raises all ships.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch them play in the games that we all have circled, right? Oregon, Ohio State. I wonder about this. We saw Ohio State last year. They lose their game against Michigan. They get to kind of take the air out a little bit and then reset and go on a run. I wonder, with all the returners coming back to Penn State, and we'll be calling their game week 2 on the Big Ten Network, I wonder if that was kind of a moment for them, those tough losses, even that one at the end of the season in the semis, and then they returned. And now, do they have that type of CFP energy that we saw Ohio State have? Do they have that lightness that they can go play and cut it loose, or do they feel that pressure? I don't think they will. I think that James Franklin and the vets will allow them to cut it loose and play free. We'll find out, because there's 2 marquee games, as we just discussed there.
Got Indiana as well. So
That's
the
right.
Big Ten playoff teams from last year, obviously they were one of them, and then they play the other 3 in Oregon, Indiana, and Ohio State. So challenging schedule, no doubt, for Penn State. I think the thing that stood out to me in talking to them, though, in the preseason, they're embracing it. They're embracing everything. They're embracing this narrative around having won a national championship since 1986, embracing the narrative around can they beat a top 5 team, could they beat those elite teams. They are not ducking it. They are ready to go in State College. Our Taco Bell countdown to kickoff. How about number 1 versus number 3 to start the season with Texas and Ohio State? First time in 3 years we've had a top 10 opener involving the Big Ten. Just the 6th time in the last 40 in the combined rank of these 2 teams, easily the best of this group. Ryan Day heads into it with a new starting QB. He was asked today what his message is to Julian Sayin.
The message is just win, find a way to win. I think when you start setting expectations, you can get yourself out of whack. We're going to take it one play at a time. He's got a good group of guys around him. He's got a good defense. He's got good special teams, a good offensive line, good skill guys. He needs to lean into those players and find a way to win the game. We'll try to get him into a rhythm and then go from there. And that's really it. It's a start. It's the first game, and we're excited for him. You're seeing him every day get more and more confident, more and more comfortable in what we're trying to do. But we got to get out in the field and play, and it's about time.
Both these teams, obviously, with new starting quarterbacks. Arch Manning did start a couple of games last year when Quinn Ewers was injured, so maybe has somewhat of an edge in experience. What did you see from Sayin in camp, and what do you think of the message that Ryan shared there?
I was not shocked to hear that Sayin, won the starting job, and the reason is basically what Ryan Day alluded to there is, hey, let's look at all the talent around him, and this is true for Coach Hartline as well. New play caller, new quarterback. Well, you're surrounded by the best wide receiver and tight end collection of talent in college football, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and Max Clare. And what a luxury to have. And I think Ohio State learned something from the Michigan loss last year. What we saw them do in the playoffs is, hey, we're going to win and lose games on the backs of our best player. They have the best offensive player in college football in Jeremiah Smith. For Julian Sayin, if it's a gotta-have-it moment, you can go to him. Hey, if he's double-teamed, that means Max Clair is going to be one-on-one. That's a guy that's going to win matchups. If Carnell Tate's one-on-one, he's going to win matchups. So for Brian Hartline, he can be like the orchestrator of a symphony, of a, what would you call it?
What symphony?
Symphony, is that the right word?
Yeah.
So you got all these weapons in front of him, and he can be the conductor and just say, hey, Julian, wherever the weak point of the defense, wherever is your one-on-one matchup, we have the guy to win. And that's a luxury that not every team has.
Well, think of the way this one ended last time, and not just with the Jack Sawyer sack, fumble, return. The place goes bonkers, Jake. We were there. It was amazing. But how about like the screen to Travion Henderson, to your point of getting the playmakers the ball? I look at this game and just love the nerd side of it, right? The Steve Sarkisian against Matt Patricia. I mean, come on, man. This is awesome when you look at Matt Patricia, his first game in college football in quite some time, first time ever calling a defense in major college football. On the other side, Brian Hartline against Pete Kwiatkowski. Remember that game, Jake? You and I were watching that game in Dallas from the media press box area. Jeremiah Smith was double covered all game. I mean, he wasn't going to get the ball in this game. So what are the answers to that? And what does Pete Kwiatkowski do, an extremely impressive and successful defensive coordinator against Brian Hartline in situational football? I get it. It's all practice, right? Like Brian Hartline told us in the spring, and he referenced to you guys in training camp, he and Coach Day, they're like the same mind. So I'm not worried about it being their first time, but it still is in terms of what are you going to call in this third down situation? What are you going to call in the red zone, let alone with a quarterback? So that intrigues me a ton. And then how about like the Arch and Julian factor? I mean, that is amazing when you look at these two quarterbacks. Arch coming out of high school, he sat, he waited. Julian sat, waited. And now these two get to go head to head. I just think we haven't anticipated quarterbacks, two young quarterbacks like this who are facing off in a game with this magnitude ever. Like, I was trying to rack my brain last night. Like, when was the last time the season kicked off with a Manning, right, or anything even comparable to that? And then the top quarterback in America. I mean, he's the Elite 11 MVP. He can just spin it coming out of San Diego and Julian Sayin. So there is intrigue for days. Can we be so blessed that this one goes into overtime? We just get a couple more bites at the apple.
It is crazy to think of, in the coaches' poll, it's a 1 versus 2. I mean, I know the AP poll's essentially what everyone goes with, but 1 versus 2, according to the coaches, in the opener, that has never happened in the history of this poll. So again, I mean, it just speaks to what a huge game it is. How much does it help Ohio State to be at home? I mean, you think about Ryan Day, like against top 10 opponents, these are the kind of games that he wins. He's 7-1 as Ohio State's coach in the shoe against top 10 foes. You've got to think the crowd is going to be energized. It just feels to me like that could really work in OSU's favor.
100%. And shoot, I know this from experience. I played in some massive games, 2 versus number 3. It was the last game of the season in my career. And that's a tough stadium. The Ohio State fans are ready to rock and roll. They're excited about this season. They said, hey, one national championship's great. I want another. The next ring is the best ring, and this game is a great opportunity to start the season off on that foot, Yogi.
How about 26 players from the last time they played were taken in the NFL draft? Yeah. So as much as like we even want to comp that, to your point, like these are new teams. I do, at least in my own mind, I go back and forth on this one. I'm like, oh, it's at home. There's no way Ohio State's going to lose this one. Their defense is so strong. Then you flip it the other way, and you think of all the returners that Texas has at key positions, especially up front on both lines. So I don't know, man. I just think we're going to get a classic. And what I heard from Ryan Day that we just played was something he's probably echoing with his team. It's just one game. It's just one game, guys. Like, you cannot make this thing something that can either catapult you to tremendous success or cause you to play poorly over the next couple weeks if you do come on the other side of this thing. So I can't wait to watch it play out because it is a long season, and it's just what a treat to see this one in week 1.
If we learned anything from last year, one game does not a season make. Ohio State was the prime example of that with the obvious loss at the end of the year to their arch rivals and still found their way to the national championship. Official preseason poll in the Big Ten, but Cleveland.com's been doing one for years. Penn State chosen to win the conference. They also asked the 25 media members who were polled to predict who will make the playoff from the Big Ten. Remember, 4 teams got in last year. Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon overwhelmingly chosen. Illinois and Michigan picked by a bit more than a third of the pollsters. And then Indiana, which made it last year, chosen by just one of the media members. Kind of surprising there. So, guys, let's dive into this. And we've talked about these teams at the top and the teams that we saw in that graphic there. So maybe outside of the teams that people fully expect to be in the college football playoff, I know we were all struck by the depth of this league, the degree to which teams have improved while we were on the tour. So who outside of that group, Yogi, do you have an eye on that might be a college football playoff dark horse?
Well, I think outside of the three that everybody's going to talk about, right, in Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, or whatever order you want, what they have is they have competitive depth in case, guys get injured over the course of the season. So I think so much of this list is how do you navigate the health and your schedule? And I think that the margins in this league now, to your point of everybody improving, are so small. So I think about Nebraska. I think about Iowa, Mark Gronowski. I think about, of course, we already knows about Illinois. We've talked about them. I think Indiana, only one vote there. I think they're slept on in this league. I look at even at Minnesota and the way their schedule is set out. They love Drake Lindsey. I mean, all the conversations coming out of training camp is how excited they are. And if Max Brosmer's success is any tell of what he learned from and what they expect him to be, I think they expect him to exceed what Brosmer did there. So those are a couple of teams, but I think we're going to have a lot of quote-unquote play-in games. Like Indiana, Illinois, September 20th. I get that we don't have play-in games and it's a long season, but there's a world, if you believe that those three are going to get in and 4 guaranteed slots to the 12-team playoff, the head-to-heads are really fun to track when you start looking at the schedule.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The schedule does play a major factor here, and I want to start with the Washington Huskies in the Pacific Northwest, a team that I don't think is getting nearly enough credit. I know we're both high on Damon Williams, Denzel Boston at wide receiver, and Jonah Coleman. I mean, a trio of quarterback, receiver, running back. That's as good as you're going to find in the conference. I think the deciding factor will be the trench play. It's so important here in the Big Ten. But in terms of schedule, Washington has 3 of their hardest games: Ohio State, Illinois, Oregon, at home, a place they haven't lost since 2021. So if they can win 2 of those 3 games, oh my gosh, they're going to have an impressive resume to make the playoffs. And then Nebraska in Iowa, Yog, to your point. I talked about it earlier, Nebraska. That Cincinnati game week 1 is a great test for them to mentally prepare themselves for the matchup at home against Michigan week 4. If somehow they can win both those games and start out 4-0, suddenly it'll be a complete mental shift for the Cornhuskers, where all of a sudden, Nebraska, Iowa at the end of the season, that could seriously be a playoff game with playoff implications. And I'll end here, Dave, because you talk about just where the conference is at a whole. And I go back in my playing days, and this is still true about the Big Ten, it was run the ball and play great defense. That's a given in the conference. But the meat of this Big Ten, and we're going to talk about quarterbacks here in a second, I would say Michigan, USC, Washington, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, Indiana, Illinois, all these teams feel about as good as they have in recent years about their quarterback situation. They all feel they have a guy under center that can lead them to victory in close games. That's going to be fun to watch.
And if you rewinded a year, I don't think we would have been sitting here saying, I really think Indiana is a dark horse to make the college football playoff, and people would have laughed at you. That's where we are in this day and age because of the way that you can reload with the portal. It's just a different time. And I think that's part of the expectation and the joy and the anticipation of this week is there's so much we don't know because we haven't seen these teams, even though we have the luxury of going to practice, we haven't seen these teams play a game. And that is fixing to end here in a couple of. Checking out the QB spot heading into the season. There is certainly some experience in the conference, led by new Iowa QB Mark Gronowski. 55 career starts at South Dakota State. And oh, by the way, his team won 49 of them. Ethan Kaliak-Manis has the most FBS starts, including his time at Minnesota. One ahead of Drew Aller. Luke Altmaier back for a third year, started at Illinois. And then there's Fernando Mendoza, 19 starts at Cal, now at Indiana. Jake, by my count, 12 new full-time starters in the Big Ten this year. The guys we saw on that list, Gronowski, Mendoza, among them. Howard and I talked about a number of these guys yesterday. Is there someone you want to highlight in that group?
Yeah, well, I kind of talked about my expectations for Washington in the last segment, and if they are going to make a playoff push, they'll need to do it behind great quarterback play from Damon Williams. And I'll tell you a little story, Dave. I was at a wedding in July of 2024, so it was last summer, and I saw Jedd Fisch there, and after I asked him how his wife Amber was doing and his kids were doing, I said, hey, how's Will Rogers looking? You know, your big transfer quarterback. And he gave me the spiel. He said, hey, Will's going to be great. He's a great veteran for us. But immediately he transferred. He said, but let me tell you about this freshman, Damon Williams. I think he is going to be special. He said he's one of the fastest guys on the team, not just a fast quarterback, but one of the fastest guys on the team. And we saw him in spurts and spots throughout the season, but then late in the season he gets opportunity against Oregon, looks great in the bowl game, and now you have coming back a veteran wide receiver in Denzel Boston outside. I like Decker DeGraff at the tight end position. They got weapons all around him, and you got one of the great play callers in college football, in my opinion, in Jedd Fisch, to help extract some of that talent from Damon Williams. That's a guy that I think, just in terms of his athleticism, his ability to push the ball down the field, raw physical talent, it's tier 1 of this Big Ten Conference. Talked about some of their home games. If they can capitalize on that, this will be a special season for the Huskies.
I know they lost the bowl game, and he was amazing in that
Phenomenal.
bowl game against Louisville. I mean, he accounted for 10 touchdowns and 1 interception last year.
Freshman, he's good.
Pretty good getting thrown into the mix in the way that he was. Okay, so Damon Williams is the guy Jake has his eye on. How about for you, Yogi?
Well, I'll tell you what, I got to stay out west here in LA, and I think I'm going to talk about the most understood quarterback in all of college football, Nico Iamaleava at UCLA. I think there's a label on him after everything that happened in Tennessee. Spent some time with him. You hear him mic'd up right now. Spent some time with him in training camp a few times. Was there over the summer. Spent some time with him and Tino Sinceri. I think his command of this system, only being there for only being there for a month in training camp, I think it's allowing him to process this system at a really high level. I expect him to have a big-time season, and that first game against Utah, it's going to be one of the most aggressive defenses he'll face all season long. So coming out of the gate at 8 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. where you are, 11 p.m. on the East Coast, Nico against that defense, we are going to learn a lot about the Bruins on Saturday night.
We ran out of time for Alaska, but you can do the math on that. Now, there's a reason a guy is #1 player in the portal, and Nico was that. You get a quarterback who started in the college football playoff last year. That is a great luxury to have for the Bruins as they look to wrapping things up on Big Ten today as we go around the Big Ten. Outstanding volleyball last night on the network. Defending national champ Penn State came from behind to defeat 14th ranked Kansas in 5 sets. It was the Nittany Lions' 14th straight win dating back to last season, including a season opening victory against Creighton. Illinois women's soccer 3-0 under new head coach Katie Hulteen beat Boston College 1-0. Sarah Foley scoring the lone goal for the Illini, who have yet to allow a goal this season. Meanwhile, the Maryland men opened their season with a 1-0 win over number 25 Georgetown. Senior forward Saddam Masareka tallied the lone goal of the game. Keeper Laureen Mack a career-high 6 saves. And don't forget, we've got football on the network on Thursday. 2 really compelling matchups against 2 of the better teams in the MAC from a season ago. Rutgers will take on Ohio University, and Wisconsin battles Miami of Ohio. Howard, Griffith, and I will get it started at 5:30 Eastern time here on the Big Ten Network. We're going to wrap things up with football with Yogi and Jake. We just finished up the 18-team tour of the Big Ten. It took 3 weeks. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. It was all the above. Yogi, I know there was a lot that happened in that few weeks, but do you have a favorite moment from the tour?
Well, breaking bread with you guys at Naples 15 in Wisconsin was pretty special in Madison. Right. But I got to go to the coach. Okay, when you come out west, you don't need to have like your fancy shoes on. Wear your slides. And Coach Gennardo's been rocking slides, I feel like, for almost 20 years with you guys at Big Ten Network. The Oregon Ducks kicked off the party on the West Coast tour, hooked him up. And then Jedd Fisch came on back and hooked him up. And then as we just continued on the tour, he got some love to Sean Foster. He gave him some, I think, the most beautiful ones of all of them. They were Jordans, which is even better. So we got to take care of Coach's feet. And then Lincoln Riley and Chad Bowden finish it off on the 4-school tour on the West Coast. So it was fun. The food was good. The drinks were good. The fellowship was great. But most importantly, the feet of Coach Gennardo have never been better.
Yeah, I think he was taking a carry-on to start, but needed a check bag to bring all of his gear back home. You talked about the sight and sounds and smells of the tour, Yogi. For me, walking into Al Glick Fieldhouse in Ann Arbor, the smell of the turf, it took me back to when I was a 17-year-old early enrollee freshman at Michigan. That's where dreams are made. And then just going around to the conference, I'm watching Penn State go through their walkthrough. And these guys, it's a walkthrough. And yet they're taking every rep as if the national championship was on the line. Greg Schiano getting on his teams about the new injury rule. It could cost him a timeout. That's the difference between winning and losing. Dave, it's like the small, seemingly insignificant things that if you dropped an alien on Earth, they wouldn't know what it meant, but that matters to winning. That just took me back to my playing days.
It's a great time. Looking forward to Tuesdays with you guys all year. Got DiNardo tomorrow, presumably wearing the new slides. He's had the same slides since 1974 at Maine, so that's good.